Bill O'Reilly did a Talking Points memo last night where he slammed Obama's new plan to release some non-violent, keyword, non-violent drug offenders. Listen.
21% of all prison inmates are doing time because of, quote, non-violent drug crimes. Now, non-violent crime means the perpetrator did not use force during the illegal transaction, outside of selling poison, of course. And therein lies the controversy here. The act of giving another person a substance that could kill them or alter their minds so they kill somebody else surely is an aggressive action. I believe it's a violent action. The President and Attorney General obviously do not. Since tough mandatory drug sentencing was imposed, the nation's crime rate has plummeted. In fact, in 2011, violent felonies were down 75% compared to 1993. Amazing. That's because many drug gang members are in prison. Remember, the drug world is not some isolated situation. Addicts steal, mug, and commit other crimes. Dealers kill people for territory, payment, and rival gangs attack each other all the time for a variety of reasons. We're seeing that now in Chicago, where the murder rate is horrific. The drug culture is not some benign opium den where people sit around contemplating their pipe dreams. Drug trafficking is aggressive, nasty, brutal, and inhumane in the extreme. It enslaves people, robs them of their dignity, and substance abusers harm and neglect children at a frightening rate. Yet some of these abusers are now being portrayed as victims, non-violent offenders. Again, if you are peddling heroin or crack or meth, you're harming people. Talking Points believes that giving drug-involved people leniency will escalate the crime rate in this country across the board. It took decades to bring violent crime in America under control. And the reason it happened was aggressive policing, aggressive sentencing, no pity for bad people. Ask any cop on the street, and they'll tell you that. But now we're living in a very liberal time where sympathy for the devil on a number of fronts is growing. Yes, America has the highest incarceration rate in the Western world, but that's because we're a nation that embraces drug abuse. From marijuana to prescription drugs to heroin, this country is hooked. And if we don't deal with that reality, all of us are going to suffer. It's just a matter of when. And that's a memo.
There are so many parts to that I love. So from the top, when he says 21% of these criminals are in jail for nonviolent crimes. But I say they're violent. Pause. Hold on. You just told us they're in jail for nonviolent crime. And then you immediately say, but they're violent. But you said they're not violent. But they are violent? Wait, so what is it? What are you talking about? Oh, I get it. You're just trying to take your opinion and override the fact. So the fact is, and the classification is under law, that they committed nonviolent crimes. But Bill O'Reilly is just unilaterally declaring, well, I think it's violent. Well, that's nice that you think it's violent, but if it actually was violent, they would have been convicted of a violent crime, dippity. God, he's such a silly person. He really is. He's such a silly guy because Bill O'Reilly loves to live in a world where he thinks that just his opinion can override reality. It's so arrogant, man. I love how arrogant it is. He just unilaterally declares shit to be wrong and him to be right, even if the facts are the opposite. But one of the main concepts he tries to get across there is, look, if you're selling substances, okay, so what? It's a willing participant. But you're selling substances, and if people get hurt on them, it's a violent crime. You know what, Bill? You may have a point there, which is why I think we should arrest the CEO of Budweiser and Heineken and the people that make Jameson and Captain Morgan's and all the hard alcohol. Or also, not just them, the cashiers that sell it at your local convenience store when you go and buy a six-pack of Corona. You know, they're guilty in it too because they're selling a product. They could say no, but selling it is a violent act. How about also the makers of Xanax, the makers of Vicodin and Percocet, all the big pharmaceutical companies that profit off this while the number of overdose deaths from those drugs and the abuse level of those drugs is rising. You know, I do think that the CEO of that company is committing a violent act. How about the head of Folgers Coffee? That's a substance that changes your consciousness. It's a drug. That's what coffee is, whether or not you want to admit it. He should be in jail. That's a violent act. Monster Energy drinks. There's been reports of people dying after having too many Monster Energy drinks. So I think the CEO of that company, the owner of that company, and anybody who sold it, they should go to jail. Are you getting a sense of how ridiculous that idea is? Am I making it clear enough? Look, there's a very simple way to really view how silly what he's saying is. Think about a guy. There's been plenty of people who die from alcohol poisoning. It happens all the time, okay? So think about the guy at the store where the person bought the alcohol that eventually killed them, right? Just the cashier who sold them the alcohol, whatever it was. Should that person go to jail? Are they committing a violent crime? Of course they're not committing a violent crime! The person is choosing to do that! It's got nothing to do with the person selling the product. And by the way, in my opinion, the product should be legal anyway. All these different substances. And also, he just totally makes up that, oh, violent crime is down because we're locking up non-violent criminals. Wait. Violent crime is down because we're locking up non-violent criminals. Violent crime is down because we're locking up non-violent criminals. That's like saying sex acts are down because we're locking up people who don't have sex. Sex crimes are down because we're locking up people who don't commit sexual crimes. That's a contradiction, Bill. That's not the reality. And by the way, what do we really attribute the decline in violent crime to? A lot of things, man. It could be just the fact that he's citing the before number he gave was before we even had the internet. You know, yes, the internet might actually, people stop committing violent crimes if they're glued in front of a fucking screen all day and they have the world at their fingertips. You know, there's a lot of reasons why violent crime could go down, and sociologists have been looking into that for a long time. But the idea that it's because we're locking up non-violent criminals, that's definitely false and definitely made up by Bill O'Reilly to suit his argument. And then the final thing I'll say here, he makes the point that, well, look, if you go soft on these drugs, people are going to use them more, and then crime is going to go up. That's obvious. Except that's not obvious. In fact, the opposite is true, because the one place where they decriminalized all drugs, is Portugal. Okay, and what happened in Portugal since they did that? Drug usage rates dropped. Whoa, that's wild, man. Drug usage rates dropped, and then also crime dropped. And look, this isn't surprising to actual criminologists, not asshole TV hosts like Bill O'Reilly, because criminologists realize, well, wait, if we have prohibition against these substances, then you're creating a black market. When you create a black market, by definition, it's going to be the mafia, and it's going to be criminals who are dabbling in that market and who run that market. So if you have criminal enterprises that are stronger because there's a ban, there's prohibition of certain substances, of course that's going to lead to more violent crime. Because you fucking are making the mafias and the cartels and the criminal enterprises stronger.